Hello, it's layperson Lisa with a reflection on the second Sunday of Advent. I have just finished reading the book The Way of the Heart by Henry Nouwen, and I think two ideas that he talks about really resonated with me and I think are really pertinent or they really tie in to Advent. Advent is a time to joyfully prepare our hearts for the coming of the Lord, to a time to slow down and reflect on our relationship with Him. Reflect on are we are we developing this intimate relationship with God as He desires, or are we allowing ourselves to be influenced by the world? And Henry Nouwen says that the two main enemies of the spiritual life are anger and greed. And it really ties into this season of the world where there's a lot of stress, a lot of hustle and bustle, a lot of search for material gifts. And Henry says that when my sense of self depends on what others say of me, then anger is a natural reaction to a critical word. And I thought for myself, like, oh wow, like how true. Because one of the things that I struggle with is that people's opinions or people's actions or lack of actions, I let that affect me, and then I would become angry. But so when I was reading this book, it really helped me to reflect and like, okay, like this is something of the world that I need to pray for holy detachment and invite Jesus into helping me to constantly keep my eyes fixed on Him rather than letting the influence of the world move my gaze. And then the other thing was, he said, when our sense of self depends on what I can acquire, then greed flares up when my desires are frustrated. And I thought this just tied in so remarkably with Advent. You know, a lot of people are in search for material gifts instead of welcoming and trying to strengthen the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And in our gospel today, we hear John the Baptist saying that I have baptized you with water. He, Jesus, will baptize you with the Holy Spirit. So when we are open to the Holy Spirit, when we desire to allow God to strengthen our gifts, the gifts that we receive at our baptism, then they help us grow in the fruits. And the baptism of the Holy Spirit helps us to be bold and courageous and ignites the fire of God's love in our hearts so that we may be who God created us to be, holy and devoted, which is what St. Peter talks about today in the second reading, to be holy and devoted. And that's who John the Baptist was. So he he was bold and courageous, and he was holy, and he spoke the truth. And that's who we're called to be, holy and devoted, rather than how the world tries to influence us to be. So what does a life of holiness look like? There We had a retreat last week, and Deacon Dave shared that when the voice in our head and God's voice are one, then that is when our will is unified with God. And that's what we should seek. We should seek that our voice and what we're saying unites with what God is saying. And because we seek to be selfless rather than selfish. We're called to go against the way of the world. It's like the fish on the Chosen logo. They're going against the current, and that's who we're called to be as well. Swim against the current of the world so that we may renew our souls, renew our minds, and to put on the mind and heart of Christ and cast out the temptations of the world, the ways of the world, and seek the shelter and the refuge of the Lord amongst the chaos of this season of the world, where Advent is a time for us to rest with Him, so that He can restore and revive our weariness and our weakness, And we're called, Jesus invites us to lean into him and away from the world so that he can hold us close to his heart and uniting his heart with ours. It prepares our hearts to fully receive him and his love. And one way we can do this is to fast from the noise of the world. Try this for one day this week. Fast from TV or radio, social media, YouTube, any unnecessary phone use, and instead spend this time dialoguing with Jesus. Often our prayers and monologue is just us talking, but allow this time of quiet. Allow and let this be something you develop each day, a dialogue, so that we can hear his voice. One of the things that we're called to do, and the second reading from St. Paul, Peter, I keep saying St. Paul. So St. Peter, he tells us that the Lord is patient with us. And we're called to be patient with ourselves and with each other. And patience is silently suffering. I was reading this book by St. John Climacus, who is like from the hundreds, like 600s or something. And he talks about monastic life. But one of the things he talks about is that when we put on the armor of Christ, and he called it the breastplate of meekness and patience, we're able to ward off every insult or jab. It's like it becomes like the water off of a duck's back. It just rolls off. We don't let those things, the things of the world, the insults of the world, affect us because we're so solid in our foundation, which is Jesus. And it all goes down to obedience. How obedience is total renunciation of our own life. And it's just when we obey God, when we unite our will with his, then we just get this strength that comes only from him, that we desire a simple life, that we face danger without worry, that we're fearless, that we, oh, and I love this, that the burial place of our will and so obedience is a burial place of our will and a resurrection of our lowliness. So a resurrection of our humility. So we have to grow in humility in order to obey. We have to stop being self-reliant and wanting to control everything. And I know I tend to do that. I tend to be self-reliant, and instead God is calling me to bury that self-reliance and to fully depend on him, to fully obey him. And it allows us to, this obedience allows us to put aside capacity for our own judgment and lay our burdens on the shoulders of Jesus, who we are yoked to. So I just love that, and I feel like that's like amazing imagery of just burying our will, burying our self-reliance, burying our desires, our own worldly desires, and then we will be resurrected in humility. We will no longer allow these things that Henry Nouwen is talking about, the anger of people, our reaction to people and their critique of us. We'll just have this humility so that we just keep our eyes focused on God and nothing else matters. We'll no longer try to go after possessions, material possessions, because the only possession we need is Jesus in our heart. And this, I think, is just such great wisdom from desert fathers like St. John Climacus, and the saint that Henry Nouwen was referring to was St. Anthony from the 300s. And so we can take this wisdom of these desert fathers and go to our own desert with Jesus this Advent as we just rest with him. We just slow down and just allow ourselves to have some honest self reflection and ask Jesus to reveal where we are being influenced by the world and invite him into these places so that we can be strengthened in obedience and strengthened in humility and just continue to grow in intimacy with him. So, this Advent, I encourage you to really slow down and spend time just resting with Jesus in your own desert, your sacred space, and just allow him to hold you and to comfort you and to strengthen you in these things, these beautiful things of humility and obedience. And this will help prepare our hearts, our minds, and our souls for his coming. Bye.